think it's good enough time. So welcome to the session. This is a session about web IDEs and why you don't like them. I've heard the topic a few times, as a matter of fact, on the main area there where they have the night hacking going on. It even came up during one of those sessions. So it's something that's in the industry and can't be avoided because I'm working on one. For myself, I can't really avoid it. So what's my background? So my name is Ken Walker. I work for IBM in Canada, in Ottawa. And I've been working on this project called Orion. And it's at the Eclipse Foundation, but you shouldn't think of it as Eclipse in a browser. It's really a new approach to doing web-based developer tooling. And I'm from IBM, and we have obviously a long history. As a matter of fact, I think yesterday was the 10th anniversary of the Eclipse Foundation being created, and that was done through a lot of IBM's contributions in source code, and it was also other people inside the industry working together with IBM to create this foundation so that Eclipse in general, at that time primarily just an IDE, could foster in that environment. Eclipse is certainly way more than just a Java IDE. In fact, when I talk about Orion, I try not to say Eclipse Orion because people will just confuse it with the IDE that exists. Really, Eclipse is tons of things. So there's the M2M or Internet of Things stuff is just super escalating inside the Eclipse Foundation. It's really, really picking up. So that Eclipse, Vert.x, everything. So Eclipse is really a broad set of things, and Orion is just another piece of that component that's part of Eclipse. So inside IBM, we reuse the components that I'm developing for Orion at the Eclipse Foundation, and we also have other consumers of that IDE. So there's SAP and Pivotal, and there's some stuff that was in Mozilla until recently when they switched to Codenvy, but we've had some working relationships with other open source projects. Previously to me working on Orion, which is I guess about 2 and some years or so, I worked on IBM's virtual machine team, which is called J9. And I was in the mobile space, so I worked a lot in telephony and telematics, game top systems, things like that, where you're doing really, really small virtual machines. So I know the Java world. I'm very familiar with the Java world. I lived it for a long time. And as a matter of fact, I worked on a lot of integrated development environments before my work in JVMs, and that was, as a matter of fact, Visual Age for Smalltalk, Visual Age for Java, which was written in Smalltalk, and then Visual Age Micro Edition, which is for our embedded offering. So it's really, I have some history, prehistory, then a bunch of like 13 years in virtual machines working really low, and then I decided to change jobs, and now I'm back up above these clouds. So why do I think developers dislike web IDEs? They tell me, actually. So you hear a lot at conferences, or I'm at part of a JavaScript user group in Ottawa, and people, they have all sorts of reasons for disliking them. So part of this presentation is about me gathering facts about what people don't like, and then how can we improve or build on what we're doing in a web IDE world so that we can maybe satisfy some of your requirements as we go forward. And we're not the only ones doing this, right? So one of it is you're passionate about the tools you use, right? You'll see probably every developer's laptop has something slightly different, and that's what we want to aim for. And you're also apprehensive about what's coming from the cloud, like, oh, what can we offer as a web IDE, or other tools, not just web IDEs, and some of that's lacking. And so I say, rightly so, you should be apprehensive. But there's also the knowledge about what people are doing out there, so that's getting better, right? And there's bigger players engaging in this space. And it's kind of interesting to share some of that. So I said I come from a virtual machine background, previous to this career anyway, and so we're really down low, right? So I say we're rocks and sticks. So most developers, and actually quite a few here still, work with just some plain old tools. They don't really want to get much in their way. And so in the VM team, it's like, yeah, that's what you need. You can start a fire with a rock and a stick and something, and that's the kind of tools we're using. So I kind of embedded a few tweets in this presentation around cloud IEs, some of them negative and some of them not so negative. And this one, it's like, oh, you know, has anyone tried Cloud9 or anything else? And it's like, no, I really just want to have Vim. Even though pretty much all the web IDEs out there that have a text editor have some sort of VI support, you still have someone who says this, right? So this little clip goes through a bunch of the editors that people use. They're standard editors. Sublime Text is obviously pretty popular, right? People really like it. It's got a lot of plug-in functionality. People are doing JavaScript development. They're doing Java development. They're doing all sorts of development using this editor. They might just use Vim. They might just use Emacs. They might use whatever. So we have to look at the use cases that these developers have. The fact that you need a plug-in model, the fact that it has to be fast, the fact that it can work with really, really large files. You have to look at all those things when we're trying to reproduce something that someone might want to consume in a web browser, right? It's not just about providing something that will edit little hello world .txt files and things like that. So we really look at what people are using, Notepad++ or whatever. So you look at those and try to gather the features that they have. Sometimes you even match their keyboard shortcuts because people are used to these tools. If they're going to use them on the side and then migrate to the web a little bit, they want to have the same kind of thing. So what about source code management? Again, that's a big one. There's lots of different source code management tools out there. And what happens is we have to support some of them in the cloud, at least. Some of the top ones. Git is obvious, right? Inside IBM, we actually have our own source code management as part of Rational Team Concert, so I kind of have to support that. If you look at some of the other cloud IDEs, you know, they're trying to provide some of the functionality for Git. They might just have a command line, but inside Orion, we try to provide a visual use for doing Git manipulation. So we have really nice side-by-side comparers and a Git status page, Git log that shows everything, cherry picking, tagging. All that stuff is not just done with a command line. It's just done with a UI. And so that, to us, is a little more friendly, right? But look at all these tools that people use, and there's no way we're going to write all those tools in a browser-based IDE. Debugging is a really, really big one because the debugger is often tied tightly to the platform. That's not as much true inside JavaScript development, so a lot of the web IDEs are great for JavaScript development, and you just use the browser to do your debugging because it's just coming from a site. But if you're going to do C, C++, Java even, then you're going to have a harder time of trying to produce that debugging experience in a browser that you're going to get on the desktop. So that's like the rocks and sticks. So we kind of move up a level and look at what other people are using. And of course, there are the IDEs. I'm not listing all the IDEs that people use here. I just kind of picked a few. I have some Eclipse background, so I put Eclipse up first. But really, these IDEs are about an ecosystem for developers. So the Eclipse has a great marketplace. They have tons and tons of plugins for people who are doing all sorts of languages, all the languages. And you can pick a particular download of Eclipse for the language you're using. People are used to the way Eclipse works. It's been 10 years that this product has been added onto and extended and used for all sorts of applications, including rich client applications, right? Without development. IntelliJ, see that on a lot of screens around here. So that's a very, very fast editor. Again, it's pluggable, now being used by Google for their Android tools. So some of these things are very actively developed still and actively used and extended by both the companies themselves and also by developers. So again, I use that word extension. Just like NetBeans, extendability as part of your application for developers is really, really important. They just might want some silly feature that they think is really important, and if they can't add it to that IDE by themselves, then something's wrong. If they're just stuck with what they get, then they're not going to like it, right? They want to tailor and tinker and extend it. So mobile, of course, is very, very important. There's a few sides. There's doing HTML5 development or JavaScript development for mobile tools. That is very popular and a pretty good target right now for actually doing that in a web IDE. But if you're doing something like iOS development, there's a bunch of things that get in your way. The tool chain that you have to use, and also the licensing and submitting things to a marketplace. And that can be quite difficult. There are some sites out there that will help you do that, including the testing, and I'll show a couple later. But that's a really hard thing for a web IDE to do, is to provide the kind of tools that you might get from Xcode, right? Both high-level tools and low-level tools. Same thing with Android development. Android development is really focused around using an IDE, whether that's Eclipse or their newer tools. So that part of mobile development is something that we're looking at. We're like, we really have to have an answer for that. But is that something that we can do today? Not as well as we'd like to. And of course, the finale for all of it is the cloud, right? So it's broken for me, the cloud's not there, how am I supposed to do my work? And that's probably the number one complaint we get is, I want to get on an airplane and I want to continue doing my development, but all my code is sitting over there. Even though I might have Wi-Fi in an airplane, it's not the same as getting on a train or in your car or whatever it is. So there's some things inside, like our Orion is actually written just plain old JavaScript, right? Just a lot of JavaScript, and some people say, oh, well, you could use like app cache or something, but great article. Slightly old, but app cache is a douchebag. So it's things are making progress in this space, but right now it's quite hard to just take a very full-featured application, something like Orion, and just migrate it and make it offline. So we have to look at new ways of maybe having a hybrid approach to doing that type of development, right? Where maybe you have a Chrome app which is tied to your web development app, and when you're going to get on a plane, then you can do some sort of synchronization to get you back to your laptop. You come back to work, everything's synchronized back up. So we get it. We get it. You guys like your tools, and hands off. We really want you to be happy, because otherwise you're not going to come and use our tools. There's really no money in the tools, right? We know that. IBM knows that as far as base developer tools. But we're building these tools into services that you can consume, and those services are tied to some of our platform as a service offerings, and so that's where my stuff ties in inside IBM. I'll show you a screenshot a little bit later, but that's what other companies are doing as well, right? They're giving you these tools because they want you to come to their ecosystems. But we want to give you what you expect to use. So there must be some benefits to a web IDE. And so the one that's always thrown back from someone who's a web IDE person is, well, when I was on the VM team and we got a new student or a new employee or a new laptop, or in our case we got like big desktops to do lots of compilation, basically it looked like this. So you were like, here's my desktop, and here it's empty, and you want to put everything up, and it takes a really long time. We had rsync, and we had all sorts of ways to try to get our tools on board, but then you'd bring up Eclipse, oh no, I have to do all my plugins, and you'd have to load all this stuff. So one thing about doing web-based development is you're trying to offload some of that into the cloud. I'll try not to use the word cloud too much. But as a matter of fact, I'm going to do a demo or some labs or something in Las Vegas for my first big IBM conference, and I was on a call with all the other guys who were trying to figure out how to get the tools onto the developers' laptops who were just going to show up and they wanted to show them how to do code. And I was like, I'm done, right? They're going to have a browser. So I'm like, haha, you guys better figure out how to get some USB keys out of IBM or something. And I'm like, they'll show up with the browser and I'll be good. So we're going from the stuff that you want to a web IDE, and to reuse this ancient meme is that people have different thoughts about what a web IDE is. And some of it is, there's so many top 10 web IDE posts out there that you could look through, and they'll all have a different set of things. They might have Orion, they might not have Orion. They might have some things that don't even resemble an IDE. They're just an editor, and you can't even save anything. But to them, that was some top thing. So if you're confused about, what a web IDE is, you're not alone, but people are looking. So more so than before, they're researching into, well, what kind of web IDEs are there? This is a trend that's rising. So the red line is typical searches for desktop IDE, and then the blue one is kind of a rising trend of people searching for web IDEs or cloud IDEs. So they're looking, what is the trend? How can I make use of it? There must be some reasons. So Tyler Jewell, he's the CEO of Codenvy, and that's a pretty popular cloud-based IDE. And they're kind of running off venture capital right now. They got quite a big influx of capital to work on this product. And so he writes a lot of interesting blog posts about the market in general. He doesn't just focus on Codenvy. He just says, oh, about the market of web IDEs, or what do people want? And he kind of broke it down into a few categories of what a web IDE might be. And it might be just simply editing or code assist. The debugger is important. We might not have it. Can we run things right out of the IDE, or are we just editing stuff and pushing it off somewhere else? Is it hosted environments so that you can do builds there and deployments? Can we form dependencies between the things that teams are working on and coding them? Or is it just a set of components that other people can take and put together and make a cloud-based development environment? Orion's a bit like several of those, actually. We do provide a platform, so the open source project is kind of divided into chunks, and it can be just an editor. So if you just need an editor on your web page, and IBM teams quite often just need an editor and some page to surface up content, either to view or to edit. So some IBM teams just pull in the editor. But bigger than that is all the other functionality, like the kind of server that's behind it. Is it a Java server? Is it a Node server? So those are a platform of open source components that Cloud9 has, as a matter of fact. There's some stuff of Codenvy that's like that. Orion is like that. There's lots of open source projects who are doing that. If you look at kind of not full IDEs, like you would think of an IDE, there's lots of ways to utilize the web more so than just doing, oh, I'm trying to do a full IDE. What are the things that people are using, kind of code editors and things like sharing examples? And so education is a really good one because it doesn't take any setup, right? You can just plunk somebody down in front of a web browser and get them going on education. So Khan Academy has that kind of setup for doing for teaching people really simple tutorials and advancing through their education there on programming modules, for example. So that's one. So evaluating, so JS Fiddle is something that people use a lot. It's a combination of your HTML, your JavaScript, your CSS, and the result. And what you do is you go in and kind of play with these things, and then you share these results with other people. And the example I have there is one of the guys on my team said, well, we do this great two text editors, a side-by-side with all the comparison highlighting inline or side-by-side comparison, but it's just a component. So he just did a JS Fiddle of here's how anybody else who wants to use this side-by-side editor on their JavaScript page for whatever reasons, here's a JS Fiddle, and there's all the stuff you need built in. But it's not an IDE, right? It's a tool for helping people evaluate and share code. Then there's experimenting. If you haven't seen this one, it's pretty interesting. It's quite new. It's called runnable.com. And they essentially give you a Docker I/O image set up for the type of application you want to experiment with. So like JS Fiddle, people write little runnables, I guess I'll just call it, where they bundle a piece of code with a particular bit of technology, and then they share it through this site. But it's not just JavaScript. It's Node. It's C++. It's Java. It's everything. So they kind of build up these Docker containers with capabilities, and they're associated with the type of thing that you might want to do, the language or the tools that you want to show, and then they just put it up. I'm not quite sure what their revenue model is, but it's really cool from someone who wants to experiment. So it's like, well, how does MongoDB work? Well, there's simple, here, open and close the database, or there's a full example. You've got your console beneath. You can go in there and type whatever you want. It's a real console to where that application is running. And then if it opens up a web a socket or something, then it gives you a link, some magic link to the server socket that's listening on their side. So you can do Node applications or Java servers or whatever you want to do just at this site. It's not an IDE necessarily, but it's certainly a great way of sharing. So one thing that we work on in Orion is everything for us, we're kind of different because we're not really a one-page application. Yeah, you might have the editor and a navigator, but everything is basically a web page, so you can navigate from page to page, and we use the concept of a URI template in passing information between these pages. And so at GitHub, you can make like a one-click link that will take you into Orion, clone a repository, put you in an editor, and you're ready to push like the deploy to the cloud button. So it probably won't show up very well here because I turned them into GIFs, but basically from my GitHub page, you can click twice and then be running an application. So that's kind of what we want to do there. Certainly inside IBM, we would not do that. At GitHub, we would, well, actually we do, but we will also have developer works articles. And so these developer works articles have things like see it running link and then code link. And it'll take you into IBM's version with just one click. So you don't have to do any setup. You don't have to learn how to clone repositories or do anything else. You just kind of click, click, and you're running like that. So those are the types of online tools that people use to educate and to share information that require nothing on your part, no setup, no nothing, right? So there's lots. I'm not going to say all the online IDEs that are out there because there's almost like another one every month. It's really crazy. I don't think that can sustain itself. There's going to be a few that'll maintain it. Certainly the open source ones have a bigger chance because they can grow a community around it and people can contribute to it. A lot of them are open source, but they'll just need people to jump on board and participate. So the one that most resembles what you would expect from an IDE, the look and feel and the behavior, is Codenvy. And it really is, multi-tabbed and a full row of menu items and things like that. But you live in that page, so there might be a bit of a hit to take the page, but then you're just living in your IDE. So they're really trying to just give you the IDE experience in a web page. And they do Java, and they do a lot of languages in that page, and they've affiliated themselves with a lot of platform as a service providers, so that you can deploy right from their environment. So they have like a PaaS menu there, and it's kind of populated with various sites, Heroku and Rackspace and all those things. So you can do Java, you can JavaScript, you can do Node.js development, right? It's kind of the full enchilada, as we say. Cloud9 has been around a long time, and if you haven't looked at it in about a year, they went through a pretty big UI transformation. It used to look a lot more like Codenvy, like the kind of IDE style. And then they made it look a little better and a little more streamlined in an approach. And it's the same thing. You basically get a VM. Under the covers, they run Cloud9 in that VM because Cloud9 is written in Node, and you can go get a lot of the source code from GitHub. And so they basically give you shell access to that VM under the covers, and there's no real restrictions. I tried as many commands as I thought would be on one of those shells, and they had, it's just basically a shell. So it's probably a full like VM image under the covers. So you can do Git, and you can SSH out to go get something and bring it back in, or SFTP. Sorry, but it's quite interesting space. Now you just get one, right? If you're not paying, like I'm not paying, you just get one of these virtual machines for yourself, and you choose the type of thing that you're going to work on. And same thing, they have a smaller list of deployment options out of Cloud9, but a lot of people seem to really like Cloud9. So no booing and hissing here. So Microsoft actually on whatever that balcony, I think there's someone there, I think, who's demoing VisualStudio Online, and actually an old colleague, Eric Gamma, is working on that project inside Microsoft. So he's one of the founders of a lot of the Eclipse work and a lot of the work that we did in IBM and previously at OTI, and they're going to push on this. They're really going to push on this development environment for all their languages, because they're going to tie it to Azure, and they're going to make it really, really easy for you to do development there. Online, debug your stuff. They have not a full shell, but they give you most access to shell commands from this IDE. And this is there's a lot of people on that team who were tool writers and also who did language tooling for Eclipse, so they have really good experience there. So it's one to watch because it's a good team working on them. We know the people working there. So that's what they're doing, and that's kind of what IBM is doing as well, is we're tying our development platform and agile planning, tracking and issues, team stuff at Jazz Hub, but it has to really tie well with IBM's cloud offerings, because that's where we're going to make the money, right? Is in our platform as a service offering. So while we can't do Java here, we can do lots of the other languages that are being utilized inside the web. And inside those platform as a service offerings, they're really about services, right? So it's analytics and sentiment analysis and access to all the things that people want, but it's made really easy. So especially in Node.js, you can compose a little application trivially and deploy it and test it, and it scales up and out. It's not a problem to do any of that, and really doing that in a browser is really easy. So so that's why IBM is working on Orion, is to consume it in products like Jazz Hub, where we're going to leverage the developer community to try to tie them back to our server and our server services for platform as a service. And you can see that's what Microsoft is doing as well. Google has some of that, like they have some of the scripting stuff you can get to, and you can deploy it there, but it's not quite as obvious as to how hard they're pushing on that. They're really good at that stuff too. So the web IDEs as they are now, I think, especially from my project, because it's an open source project, and at the moment I'd say we're trying to fill a gap there. We're not as complete as what a developer has on their desktop. It's not there yet for us. And so I think of it more like Google Docs for code, where there's a hybrid. People use Google Docs for certain applications, certain things like to share or to work on something or collaboratively, or it has enough functionality to get the job done. And sometimes if they need to step down a bit, well, then they'll use something on their desktop if they have to. So that's where I see the work that we're doing. But we really need to know what the end game is, and the end game is having all this checklist of things. So this is very slick editing, because the editor is where we all live as developers. The editor has to be really good. So our editor in Orion's being done by a couple of the ex-leads of a lot of the SWT editor work, so they know a lot of the performance work that's involved in writing a really good editor, and also how to make it extensible by people. So all the content assist and all the markup and gutters and syntax highlighting, all that framework is all extensible in the browser. And so we know that that's important. And you can tell when you go to the other web IDEs, some of them are really paying attention to that. Specifically Content Assist, because we're all used to it now. It's kind of harder in JavaScript, so there's a few twists to it from our perspective that we're doing. But there are open source projects that are working on Content Assist stuff, and so are we. Like together we're working on that. The first full source code control means that I need to be able to do the things that I'm used to doing, working with GitHub primarily, or Git in general. That's really important, and so you have to have first class versions of that type of access. The shell access is something we're actually missing in Orion right now, but we're working on using Docker IO as a way to mirror to get to your projects from the browser. And we have all the hooks in place, but we're just trying to figure out how to do that and make sure that things are secure, because Docker's pretty new, and to put a lot of that underneath the covers of all your machines, we want to make sure we're doing the right thing there. So it's really neat to see Docker talks, because you can go up and talk to people about security and how are they doing things. But like I said, Cloud9 does that by just having a VM. It's yours and it's per project. So you don't get to see any of your other projects. You get to see that project, and you can do whatever you want in there. And we're trying to give you a little more access, because sometimes people reference things or work on multiple things in multiple projects. So we want to give you access to your workspace versus just a project. The compiled languages, I said that Codenvy already does something like that, and Microsoft is doing some of that in their Visual Studio because they're supporting compiled languages to JavaScript for sure. We're not there yet. We're working with some initiatives with some people in the Eclipse Foundation to open up a new proposal for a project there to do collaborative work on not just, say, Java, but how to do those types of services in the cloud for other things. And it wouldn't just be for Orion. It would be that other IDEs could benefit from this infrastructure to talk to compilation services and other services like doing content assist or syntax highlighting. Those are all services that we could all consume. I mentioned debug. We don't have a debug framework in Orion. Cloud9, actually, you can debug Node.js applications, and it kind of just uses its editor. It's actually pretty slick when it works. I had some problems with that, but it did work. For us, we need to look at how are we going to have that typical good debug experience. I worked on a debugger way back in the Visual Age days, so I know how important it is and also how hard it is because you can provide something, but developers are used to a very high level. Their expectations for debugging are quite high. And then I mentioned mobile a little bit because that's pretty important in today's market. So we say, people are already migrating. They're already migrating to the cloud. You might not have used Gmail. You might not have used Amazon Web Services. You might have hosted everything yourself. Now you don't do that. You can't keep your machine running, and it costs too much money to power it, so you let somebody else take care of that and also scale it out. You can't scale it out. These platform as a service providers, that's what their job is to scale these things out. GitHub wasn't around, so where did you keep your source code? Before, different repository types, sure, but social coding and GitHub, that type of environment is something everyone is used to now. But if you looked before that, you'd be like, "Wow, that sounds scary." Like Dropbox, putting your files where everyone can have access at them is a bit scary. But people are moving to those cloud-based services. We're trying to parallel that by giving you access in the cloud to those services as well. If you're afraid of the public cloud, then you can always take these tools and use them on-prem. So that means on your own premises with your security, doesn't get out. Most of these cloud providers also have that on-prem solution. So it's still cloud to you and your employees, but nobody externally can get to any of these services. And then there's some, like if you're doing that, then you can take advantage of a lot of services, the public one anyway, of things that are out there that can help you do development because you can't have every browser, whether that's mobile or desktop. It's really hard to do all that testing. So there's a lot of growing cloud providers for things to help developers. So this one is called Browser Stack, and I think it says 300 desktop and mobile browsers for you to do your testing against. You just can't have that many browsers yourself. The other one is testing devices. iOS is probably not too bad. You could almost own every one of those, but the other device manufacturers, it's growing crazy, right? So someone like these guys, I don't know what they have in here. They say test hundreds of devices. So I did a little screencast of all the Android devices, and it takes a little while to scroll through them all. So if you have a service that can help you test all these types of Android devices where you can only own 2 maybe, that would be a really big bonus for you as a developer working in the cloud. And so these are the types of things that we want to pair with. Orion's just starting to get to the point where we're deploying things from Orion, not just doing like SFTP or whatever, but actually talking to platform as a service providers, and doing work with them. So we're kind of focusing on the open source world. So right now we're looking at Cloud Foundry, but we hope that by doing like unintegration and showing how you would do that, that we might get others on board. At least from my perspective, I have priorities. I've kind of listed what I know developers want, but I also have there are actually people who are like, no, I like the Cloud IDE like it is. I just want you to improve the features that I need in a Cloud IDE. I don't use those other tools. And I would say closest to that is like JavaScript development, where you're just doing browser-based development. it might be different than doing compilation, right? And so I have to look at those priorities. Of course, I work for IBM, so I have to look at their priorities for what I'm going to put in my roadmap. I have to look at the other contributors, the other companies that are part of Orion, and look at what their priorities are. So interestingly, SAP is working in Orion, they have committers in Orion, and they're really interested in Gerrit. So we had, of course, we had full Git support, but it wasn't really good for Gerrit, so doing code reviews with Gerrit. And that's really big in the Eclipse world, but also Gerrit is growing into a lot of companies where they want to have source code reviews before commit. At Eclipse, it's really good because non-committers they just get a branch is made for them. They put their code there. If the code's reviewed, it's automatically rebased and put into the stream after you review it. So we just didn't have very good support for that in Orion. Doing full cloud-based Gerrit reviews. So actually, they're using Orion internally, so they wanted to have that. So they're actually contributing that to Orion. And that's one example of, well, there's already a cloud service called Gerrit. It works with Git, and you already have a cloud-based IDE, so there's another integration that's happening, not on your desktop, and that makes me happy. So those are the priorities we're looking. Obviously, we're listening because I'm doing an insulting talk against myself, and we're getting there. So hopefully you'll have a bit of a look at some of the cloud IDEs. I didn't try to make this my own pitch against my own open source project or even IBM stuff, because there's lots out there. I didn't even list probably 14 other cloud-based IDEs that are out there. So they might do what you want. So I put a hashtag at the beginning, which was about Web IDE talk or something, which had no results. So there better be some results where you're saying, yeah, well, I might use it or I'll never use it, for me to take back and go, okay, well, what are these guys? Why would they never use it? Oh, they'll never use it because it's too slow, or I don't have a browser on my laptop, or something like that. So we've got lots of time for questions, so I don't mind talking about, or you asking me questions about what it is that's missing, I've already insulted myself, so you can't harm me too much. So you're all using them. Great, great. Yep, he's coming there with the...
Hi. Thanks. Can you talk more about the plugin infrastructure for maybe to the extent that you know about the other ones, or only on Orion's plugin infrastructure?
Sure. So I know that some of the other ones are more around how to plug into the IDE on the server side. So some of them you have to talk to them and get something put into their server so that it's surfaced to the client. I think Cloud9 is like that, and I think Codenvy has got a hybrid model there. I haven't really written any plugins for it. Orion's model is actually just an in-browser plugin, so it's not a plugin that works against Chrome or works against Firefox or Opera or whatever. It's actually, we embed iframes and we communicate between Orion and the iframes, and we provide services. It's a microservice architecture. And so you plug into the services, you query the services. It's like a really, 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 really tiny OSGI kind of model there, where we offer up services from Orion. The pages consume them, the plugins contribute to those services or consume from those services, and then that all lives in your browser page. So the services can come from somewhere else, right? Since they're living in an iframe, the security model is intact, and so the services can actually come from your page. So you might be using Orion Hub, which is our public try out Orion if you want. So you could be using that and plug in, bring something, it's just CSS, HTML, JavaScript from your website. And if that has to talk back to your website to do some work, that's fine, because it's your website and that's legal in the browser. We have just if you're making plugins on our server, they might have a little more capabilities with respect to the file system. But all in all, people might either take the server and clone it and do something else with it, or they may just, they're happy with just adding extensions to the editor, or extensions to the navigator, that type of thing, just using our plugin model. we have, I didn't really mention it, but we have like 2 servers. So we have a Java server, and that's a multi-user server. Our Orion Hub place has something like 23,000 accounts. I don't know how many are active at one time. Our Jazz Hub thing has less accounts, but more people active at one time. So we're trying to work on scalability of that server. And then we have a Node server, which is much smaller, less capable, so it doesn't have all our Git pages and stuff and such. But the client-side code is all the same. It's just a server. It's just the server serving up our client pages, minified, of course, and providing RESTful APIs for things like the file system or our search engine or shell support. And the Node server just has a little less than that. And another employee that I work with, he's been hacking on Go, so he wrote a Go server. So the server is completely written in Go, and he wrote the file system implementation in Go, but then he just serves up the Orion content, and it just talks back to the server, and it's the same editor. So he added a bunch of extensions for Go, content assist, and syntax highlighting, and executing Go things, and compiling, and whatever else he needed because he couldn't find like a decent Go IDE. So. Anything else? No? All right, apparently I have to go embarrass. Oh, there's one there.
So you said that you could think about Orion as Google Docs, but for code.
Right.
And one of the most awesome features in Google Docs that I think is the multiple cursors.
Right.
With all the collaborators.
Yeah.
And is that something that might be available in Orion? Because I think that would be really cool for remote pair programming and stuff like that.
So we don't currently have that. It's something that we get asked for. It probably wouldn't be an issue implementing it, but we haven't got around to that yet. We get a lot of requests for that, but not so many requests inside for that because I don't think they realize kind of how powerful that could be as both pair programming or education or code reviewing. Right, you're both looking at the same thing. So it's a feature that we know about. I'm trying to think of any of the other IDEs do that. I think Codenvy might, and can't remember what Cloud9 does. But there are some other ones that might have that specific feature.
Yeah, my sort of comment is, I mean, you know, if I think about Google Docs, it's kind of like mediocre tools with great collaborative capabilities.
Right.
And, you know, so it's kind of like, well, why bother with web IDEs if they don't have great collaborative capabilities?
Right.
You know, it's sort of, yeah.
So the sharing that I mentioned of very easy to get access to samples and examples and running things. While that's not 2 people collaborating at the same time, it's a learning experience for people to be able to do something right away out of the box. I mentioned the runnable thing where you just try a whack of code without any commitment. Codenvy actually has something, I'll call them workspaces. I can't remember what their technical name is, but they're no commitment, like no login, and you can go try things out in their space, and it just kind of vacuums them up after like 2 hours or something. And so they have something where you can try things out. We've been finding that this kind of social learning aspect around web IDEs has been really powerful, especially in our cloud world, teaching people about these services, because it's click, you're looking at an example, you don't have to commit it to your GitHub account or anything. You can just click code, click again, and have it deployed into the cloud for you to look at the running application. So as a learning method for those services that we're providing, that's really valuable to us. But maybe having stronger collaboration with pair programming or something like that might be better. I don't disagree with what you're saying about the collaborative part. So, but I think the ease of use of a web IDE and getting people up to speed and I use that example of me preparing for this conference. I'm pretty confident in people having a browser on their desktop, but the other people who are hopeful that people will come with Git and Cloud Foundry tools pre-installed and the right Java version on their machine and all that stuff. To me, that's, we're not there yet with Orion. Some of the other cloud IDEs are a little further along there. But that I just see us growing on those capabilities. Okay, thanks.